Yes, folks, the corrupt Bidens have clearly been exposed by the New York Post. And people are rightfully angry about the story being censored by Facebook and Twitter. But the sad reality is this: they haven't broken any law. They are legally permitted to be as biased as they want. And I'm afraid to say this, but the answer is not to remove their Section 230 liability protection, but rather conservatives should create their own platforms and compete. Anyway, today I'll start this off with that pathological liar, Adam Schiff.
Let's discuss with the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Does it surprise you at all that this information Rudy Giuliani is peddling very well could be connected to some sort of Russian government disinformation campaign?
Well, we know that this whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin. That's been clear for well over a year now that they've
No, you've been lying for well over a year now.
been pushing this false narrative about the vice president and his son. And, you know, the idea that the president, that the White House counsel and others were made aware that Giuliani was being used by Russian intelligence and using Russian intelligence in the sense of meeting with an agent of the Kremlin and pushing out this Kremlin false narrative. The idea that they were knowing and still on the floor of the Senate during the impeachment trial, pushing this Kremlin narrative is pretty breathtaking. But I guess at this point, we can't be shocked by anything this administration does, no matter how craven. But clearly, the origins of this whole smear are from the Kremlin.
Yeah, anyway, now to the truth.
Also breaking tonight, the third story in a row, there are new developments in the Hunter Biden email story. Here's senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel in Washington. Good evening, Mike.
Brett, good evening. One senior federal official tells Fox News the FBI and DOJ concur with DNI John Ratcliffe's assessment that Hunter Biden's laptop and emails were not part of a Russian disinformation campaign. And the senior federal official says the FBI is in possession of the Hunter Biden laptop in question. That breaking moments ago.
Yeah, and they're now looking into money laundering as well.
Also, late today, a new photo has emerged in the New York Post showing former Vice President Joe Biden's son Hunter and purported Kazakh officials. It is undated. We're checking with our sources to get as much information as we can about it and the proper context, as we are with all the new revelations in this Hunter Biden story. Big tech about to be under the spotlight. Negotiations continue with Senate Judiciary, which is threatening subpoenas for the CEOs of Facebook and Twitter on Thursday.
We should have no more foot dragging. We should have proactive action here to address the concentration, to address the power, to address the censorship.
Some Republicans charging censorship, even election interference, as the social media platforms blocked distribution of the initial Hunter Biden email story.
You look at all the corruption in his family, it's tremendous corruption. Nobody's ever seen. I mean, that laptop, nobody has ever seen anything like that. He's gone into hiding.
President Trump accusing Joe Biden of staying away from reporters ahead of Thursday night's debate to avoid answering questions about his son Hunter's purported laptop and emails. The president also jumped on this May 2017 email with Chinese energy executives verified by a source on the email chain, which discusses payment for 6 people. It includes a reference to 10% of the equity in the deal being held by H, assumed to be Hunter, for the big guy, which sources say is Joe Biden.
The vice president got a kickback, and everybody knows it, and they've known it for a long time.
Fox News has obtained images, including what appears to be a receipt from the Wilmington, Delaware computer repair shop signed by Hunter Biden. It also listed an email and cell phone number for him, and documentation from the FBI's interaction with shop owner John Paul MacIsaac. It shows the Bureau took possession of an alleged Hunter Biden laptop and external hard drive last December. Senate Homeland Security Chairman Ron Johnson wants answers about the FBI's actions since then.
The FBI owes us a defensive briefing. If this shop owner is fraudulently peddling information to the Congress, that's a crime. The FBI ought to brief us on that as well.
Investigative journalist Glenn Greenwald notes the Biden campaign's silence on the authenticity of what's been reported.
No one in the Biden camp, not Hunter Biden, not Joe Biden, not anyone with the Biden campaign has even insinuated, let alone stated, that the emails are anything other than authentic.
The FBI has made every effort to stay out of the 2020 election after it was front and center in 2016 with Hillary Clinton's emails and her private server. But tonight, some breaking news. We are told by a senior federal official that the FBI is in possession of the laptop and that the FBI and DOJ concur with the Director of National Intelligence that this is not part of a Russian disinformation campaign. Brett?
Yeah, anyway, moving on.
Can I just pick up, James, on something that Corey just touched on there about interference in media, in the media interference in elections in the West, an issue I thought would have really upset every civil libertarian, every leftist, screaming blue murder. You've got huge tech companies. You've got Twitter. You've got Facebook. They're now trying to block people from reading or reposting links to reports that a computer's been found with emails of the son of Joe Biden, the Democrat presidential candidate. These emails show Hunter Biden arranging a meeting between a Ukrainian gas company that was paying him reported $100,000 a month to this guy who's had been a drug addict, etc. And his father, he arranged the meeting between him and his father when Joe Biden was vice president and in charge of Ukraine policy. What do you make of how the social media giants are trying to smother this story?
Andrew, I think there's two really important separate questions here. Firstly, is this a good idea for social media giants to do that? And I would say no. I think they should support the free exchange of ideas and free and open debate. And the second question is, should it be legal? Now, as someone who does believe in property rights and freedom of speech and freedom of the press, I believe that if you start a social network and you want to attach conditions to what can be posted on that social network, you should be free to do so. You can say we're the leftist social network and only leftist views are welcome here. But I think you should be honest about that
and he's right there.
Admit that and not hide behind cute excuses like, oh, we don't allow the posting of private information, or we don't allow information we don't know the provenance of. I mean, these social networks allowed WikiLeaks material hacked from the United States government to be posted very happily, but they're a bit uncomfortable about emails coming from a laptop handed into a New York repair store. So I think they have to be consistent and have to be upfront and honest, and then it's up to us to judge them accordingly and take our patronage where we want to put it.
The one problem with James's theory that I see, though, Corey, is that, yes, I agree, property rights, and you shouldn't be made to carry messages you don't want to. I mean, if that's your network. But the point is that Twitter and Facebook have built up such massive market dominance, and only now they tell us they're going to do this, that actually disenfranchises a lot of people. There is a distortion here of the political process.
Andrew, I absolutely agree with you, but there is a technical difference. The media giants, when they were startups, they decided they didn't want to be publishers. They were just platforms. And so they were given an exemption under, I think it's Regulation 230 in America. And that exemption basically said, well, as long as you don't stifle the conversation, as long as you don't interfere and censor the conversation, we won't hold you to account for what is on those networks. And that's why they don't get sued, the social media networks, for what would be libelous in any other place. It's up to the individual. And so they're now in breach of that. It was all good and well when they were little computer boards or bulletin boards and people were building up their business. But now they have effectively a monopoly or a monopolistic oligarchical behaviour there. They say, well, we're going to censor whatever we want to. We will not allow opposing views. We'll do it in such a spurious manner that they can no longer be referred to as social media. It is socialist media.
Exactly.
They are the gatekeepers to what we can see out there. It is an absolute travesty, and I think personally,
it's now publishers.
Yeah, they are.
And let's sue them.
They should be held to the. They should be held to the same account as publishers, and if they won't be held to that account, they should be broken up and dismantled. It's not about disrupting their property rights. They have changed the game from when they started.
Yeah, are you sure about that?
Tech enjoys a special immunity from liability.
We should consider amending Section 230.
For the privilege of 230, there has to be a bigger sense of responsibility.
Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube aren't open platforms. They're censors.
TV personalities and politicians are calling for changes to Section 230, the 1996 law that makes possible the internet as we know it. But they don't seem to have a clue about what the law actually says or who it really protects.
The goal here, Kim, is not to get less speech. The goal is to get more speech.
Section 230 allows for the free exchange of ideas on the internet, and it may be just as important to online free speech as the First Amendment. Section 230's most important sentence reads as follows.
No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider.
But a lot of people have found creative ways of redefining what the law says.
Big tech made effectively a bargain with Congress and a bargain with the American people. We'll be neutral, we'll be fair, we won't be biased, and in exchange for that, we'll receive what is effectively a federal subsidy.
Neutrality is not a condition of the law. In fact, Section 230 was designed in part so that internet companies could discriminate by filtering out content that's illegal, indecent, or just otherwise objectionable. Before Section 230, online companies feared that any moderation would make them legally liable for user content. Section 230 explicitly says that's not the case. Good faith and voluntary attempts to filter out unwanted posts and users are okay. Without Section 230, it would be hard for companies to avoid lawsuits and criminal charges without either becoming cesspools of totally unmoderated speech or banning user-generated speech entirely.
They're becoming de facto publishers. They're actually the messengers. They're not the moderators of an open forum.
There is no legal distinction in Section 230 between a publisher and a platform. The word platform doesn't even appear. What matters for legal purposes is who is responsible for creating particular web content. Judgment calls about user speech, however poorly executed and whatever ideological biases are apparent, just don't affect whether a company is broadly protected by Section 230 or not.
Big tech has gotten these giveaways from government, this sweetheart deal from government where they can't be held accountable.
Big tech enjoys a special immunity from liability.
People like to pretend Section 230 created a legal loophole, but the Congress that passed Section 230 back in 1996 was explicit. Section 230 would not apply when it comes to federal criminal laws, and it would not apply to intellectual property law, which means that copyright violators and serious criminals do not get a free pass because of Section 230. What the law does provide is limited protection from criminal charges brought by state or local law authorities, and some immunity from getting sued in civil court. This immunity is lost if a company creates illegal content itself, or if it edits content in a way that contributes to its illegality. And it's lost if a company participates in illegal acts to obtain that content, or otherwise engages in or profits directly from some illicit action. In general, Section 230 is meant to leave room for holding online operators accountable for their own sins, but not for those of their customers.
If they're going to have this special immunity that nobody else gets, by the way, they should not discriminate.
Section 230 doesn't only benefit companies. As attorney Jeff Kosif, author of The 26 Words That Created the Internet, says, there are also significant free speech benefits to the public. Section 230 shields not just providers of digital services from litigation, but the users of these services too. Without it, anyone could find themselves liable for retweeting, reblogging, or posting links to content that is later found to break the law.
Yeah, and that's my point. Without Section 230, people couldn't even comment without being liable. Anyway, the following guy sums it up well.
Section 230 was born.
The authors of Section 230 had two goals.
This is Jeff Kosif. He wrote the book on how Section 230 shaped the modern internet, literally.
The first goal was to allow this new internet industry to develop without regulation, without litigation, basically weighing down all of these companies. The other goal was to give the platforms the flexibility to develop the moderation practices and policies that they saw fit without suddenly being held liable for every word on their services.
The dual provisions were known as Section 230's sword and shield.
It's hard to imagine the internet existing in its current state without Section 230. When you look at the most successful platforms in the world, if there is the chance of these platforms being held liable for every word that their users post, their businesses simply could not function.
Exactly. Now, folks, as bad as Twitter and Facebook, etc. are, they're better than having nothing. Right now, we have nowhere viable to go until Conservatives create their own truly competitive sites. And when they do, they'll also come under attack. So Section 230 must be protected. Otherwise, we can kiss free speech goodbye completely.